can I update? Does this get updated live? I think so. Um, cool. Can I? Where's my phone? There you go. Let's just tweet about these. Twitch and certain systems. There we go. So I wish there'd be a nicer way to embed things in Twitter like these. John me alive as we read. Oh God, I did I write live with F? Oh Jesus. Anyway, where were we? So we actually, I need to keep an ear open because there might come someone like a package delivery. So where were we? Let me open chat. Cool. I think I didn't finish. I quickly scanned through chapter 2. Chapter 3 talks about the limits of even quantum computations in chemistry. Yeah, I think that's probably the one too. Okay, so maybe let's. So I feel like lured into actually jumping into this one. Learning as an alternative to computation. Probably I'll read that because this is, yeah, I'll then come back to this. Limits of even quantum computation in chemistry. Like I don't know, maybe you gotta read this sequentially, but simulations, basic question. So I guess at some point this, I guess chapter 3 or the section 3 goes through like undecidability. Similar status to the more famous EP equals to MP. What is NC? If one allows the space of the quantum computer to expand polynomially with the simulation time, the result is more unclear and related to the classical debate of if any computation can be parallelized arbitrarily, while encapsulated by the theoretical question of if P equals NC. What is NC? NC, complexity. Complexity NC. So Nick's class, Nick's class, is a set of decision problems decidable in polylogarithmic time on a parallel computer with a polynomial number of processors. Okay, so it's like if we would parallelize the process, but in a polynomial order. Okay. Anyway, so let's go through these. Section 4, learning as, and I'm just keeping section 3 because I assume that's what's going to talk about, but I'll come back to these anyway. Learning as an alternative to computation. Rather than claim one must give up hope on problems where the most natural formulation looks undecidable or hopelessly expensive, we argue that embracing the undecidable interpretations of these problems frees one from the destruction of the combinatorial approaches and leads them to embracing the only known resolutions to problems that exist for halting problems. Leads them to embracing the only known resolutions to problems that exist for halting problems. The first and not really palatable solution that has been mentioned is running time dynamics forward and hoping for the event of interest to occur. The second and more actionable viewpoint is to understand that systems with advice can formally resolve such problems. So that was indeed systems with advice, because this was mentioned in the previous section. But it doesn't seem to pop up anyhow. It was recently shown that data from the real world can act as a restricted form of advice. To solve halting problems, one's advice would need to constitute a form of infinite time pre-computation. However, much like the argument of finite versus infinite systems, the pre-computation performed by the physical universe before this point, thought finite, though finite, is already quite strong and available to be revealed through experiments. To see an example of these in chemistry, one can look at the field of natural product synthesis, where one seeks to synthesize chemical species found in nature from simpler, readily available components in a finite number of steps. For the most general complex molecule, it can be quite difficult to say if a product can be reached with a fixed set of reagents and conditions, or at all, perhaps due to some intervening side reaction. In fact, we conjecture this form of the problem may be undecidable, since we could specify the target molecule as a particular strand of DNA. By contrast, in the study of natural product synthesis, the challenging question of chemical synthesability is answered by nature itself, and practitioners are free to discover practical routes towards a product rather than ponder if success was even possible theoretically. So what do they mean? They mean that because we know that the actual end product exists, we know that it must be synthesizable. And so that is what the advice is telling us. The challenging question of chemical synthesability is answered by nature itself, and practitioners are freed to discover practical routes towards a product rather than ponder if success was even possible theoretically. Yeah, because I guess what the halting problem is telling you is like you're trying to resolve whether something will happen at all or not. And in this case, because you know that it can be done, yeah, but you don't know whether it can be done given a restricted set of reagents or something, right? In this sense, empowering ourselves with observations from the physical world can enable answers to questions that cannot be practically resolved with rote algorithms. More generally, we believe one could view the models and study of synthesis in organic chemistry um, and their predictive success in this light. Hence, taking this point of view suggests that approaches based on learning are fundamentally different than those that rely on computation alone. Okay, but let me just reread these again. Example of chemistry, the field of natural product synthesis. One seeks to synthesize chemical species found in nature from simpler, readily available components in a finite number of steps. That's the problem. Is I have um, a set of simpler um, species, chemical species, and I want to make sure whether I can synthesize a target species in a finite amount of steps. Um, it can be quite difficult to say if a product can be reached with a fixed set of reagents and conditions or at all. Perhaps there's some intervening side reaction. In fact, we conjecture this form of problem may be undecidable, since we could specify the target molecule as a particular strand of DNA. Yeah, but why? By contrast, in the study of natural product synthesis, the challenging question of chemical synthesizability is answered by nature itself. And practitioners are free to discover practical routes towards a product rather than ponder if success was even possible theoretically. I don't quite get it. I don't quite get the analogy. Because it's like the halting problem is like, yeah, it's the same. Like given a specific type of program, you can actually check that, right? Because you can do like static analysis and things like this, and with things like you can solve the halting problem for a specific set of inputs. It's in general not always possible, so um, that's why we label it as undecidable in general, but it's not generally undecidable, or it's not always undecidable. And here's the same. Like I mean, I'd say if I have a set of I mean, okay, I guess you have a set of a fixed set of reagents and conditions, and so you can apply all the combinations and then see what happens. I guess that's what they mean by that nature shows you. Okay, I'm not so sure I grasped the analogy completely here, but let's go ahead. Hence, taking this point of view suggests that approaches with the rise of popularity in machine learning, naturally, these is now a flurry of work applying. There's now a flurry of work applying techniques of machine learning to chemistry. The applications range from prediction of direct simulation quantities or synthesizability and inverse design. Believe the results we believe the results we highlight here bolster the motivation for pursuing this line of work in the general sense, but also supports the long-standing tradition of chemists developing physical models as well. While much practical work remains to be done in finding the best representation of for our approaches, it is now understood that these approaches are fundamentally different and indeed more powerful in some ways than traditional simulation approaches. In particular, recent work has shown that the power offered by data from a quantum computer can lift classical models to be competitive with their quantum counterparts in some cases. If nature is indeed a universal quantum computer, this would suggest that quantum computations could help fill the role of natural experiments in providing data to empower learning models, but with improved programmability and flexibility. This might suggest that in the future, a key role of quantum computers, which still remains scarce compared to their traditional counterparts, may be to provide data for learning models primarily run on traditional computers. However, that would be a rather unexciting fate for a technology that pushes the limits of our understanding of the universe. Um, Instead of accepting this fate, we appeal to other recent work that has shown an overwhelming advantage for quantum computers in how they can process data moved directly into the computer from a quantum sensor. That's what. Okay, so that's what's getting interesting, I guess. To other recent work that has shown an overwhelming advantage for quantum computers in how they can process data moved directly into the computer from a quantum sensor, a process referred as transduction. 76, 77. Oh, Preskill is involved. Okay, this and this. Transduction. I think I remember seeing this paper. Transduction. I mean, the word is not appearing there at all, but it's probably worth a read as well. Transduction also doesn't appear anywhere. Transduction 2019. Oh, this is an actual talk. Convert quantum signals from one energy to another is an important area of quantum science technology to present earlier. I guess the idea here would be that you were somewhat inputting the data into the quantum computer with these sensors. This would suggest that quantum computation could help fill the role. I don't know. A comparison with the traditional data pipeline is shown in Figure 3. Yeah. So as an alternative to measurement, right? In such cases, even performing quantum data processing on even very few copies stored in quantum memory can allow one to extract properties of quantum systems that would require exponentially more data in the classical case. Even early machines may be able to manipulate few copies for limited times and store this quantum data for future models. This separation is stronger than a traditional computational separation, as if limited measurements are available due to the transient nature of a system, no amount of computation can allow traditional measurements and computation to catch up. This implies that even systems with a number of qubits that can be classically simulated could prove advantages. If the quantum computer has quantum memory that can maintain states in quantum form, this extends the power of these approaches even farther. The relationship between this hierarchy of data models and traditional simulation is depicted in Figure 1. Moreover, if one ventures further into the realm of speculation, recent computer science results have shown that if one can entangle two particles trying to prove something to another, what they can convincingly prove expands to unimaginable heights, including halting problems. While this celebrated result, MIP, I remember reading about this, but I didn't go into this. Has not yet been directly connected with the physical world, it is tantalizing to imagine how it might reflect on the power of physical experiments empowered by entanglement to reveal the mysteries of the universe. The question, of course, becomes where to find such useful quantum data and how to effectively get it into the quantum computer. Chemistry has long benefited from the power of quantum sensors in nuclear magnetic resonance experiments. Well, okay. While the most basic forms of these experiments are based on ensemble measurements at an effectively high temperature, they offer incredible insight and are fundamentally quantum. Interestingly, the form of these basic experiments can be closely identified with the so-called one-plane qubit model, or DQC1, and this has inspired some recent work in pursuing advantages with NMR. However, advanced techniques. In addition to the design of more advanced molecular quantum sensors, is an active research area. With sufficient advances in transduction techniques and developments in quantum error correction, it may become possible to load data from molecules. Yeah, that's what's cool. So it may become possible to load data from molecules directly into quantum computers and perform manipulations that are probably challenging for a classical device, even with unbounded compute time to replicate, due to the query separations we mentioned above. This could enable faster chemical identification, unprecedented accuracy in examining quantum effects, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what do I take out of these? Essentially, is if you can get data directly to the computer via some sensors, or with this transduction, which I guess essentially it's some sort of probably entanglement or something like that, isn't it? Where you're kind of essentially coupling one state to the quantum computer state or something like that. I don't know. Untapped resources in quantum computing. The discussion thus far has largely centered around the role of quantum computer science, or quantum computers themselves, in your pursuit to understand chemistry. What theoretical tools from quantum information science with potential to impact computational chemistry remain untapped? For example, techniques in tensor networks receive much of the development in quantum information have not begun to inform ansatz for correlated wave functions. Both matrix product states and tensor network states, coupled with an entanglement perspective and strong correlations, has led to a wealth of theoretical developments. Quantum correction. Quantum control of signal from laser excitation is may use to control and measure the system through feedback. That gets a bit too low level for my taste. Traditional thermalization would allow. It turns out the exponentially long suppression of transport out of collection of desired quantum states is reliant on the abstract digital observer. Yeah. The development of quantum correction, considering the development of simulation for particular kinds of quantum states and stabilized states. The states can exhibit essentially maximal entanglement across the system, yet are incredibly efficient to simulate. Classically, scaling like n square n cube. Mm -mm -mm. Okay, so it's just talking about quantum error correction all the time. And degeneracy as a mechanism for protecting information. Yeah, basically. Exactly. If nature were to follow a similar path, perhaps the electronic near degeneracy and resulting entanglement in these systems could be an avenue for protecting a coherent reaction pathway. In addition, many codes have topological protection. Topological effects have been studied in the context of electronic intersection. Do not have access. Natural systems do not have access to an optimal decoder to remove excess entropy. The notion of self-correcting memories, where systems exhibit such behavior more naturally, draws an enticing connection. State versus stabilized rotation viewpoint in systems. And that's the outlook, which we already read. I mean, you know, it's really well written. I don't really know whether I want to go through section 3. But it's basically what bothers me a little bit is the example here with the synthesizing stuff. But the gist of the idea is that you learning as an alternative to computation. So it's just I guess the difference there is just the data, right? It's the observational data. That's kind of what makes learning, is that you actually adapt your computation uh, based on data, based on yeah, on stuff you observe, basically, right? But in a sense, the process of learning is also a computation. I don't know if it's not a bit more meta in this case, but like, you know what I mean? Like your input is just your inputs are your computation, your current state or your current computation model, and new data. The training algorithm is an algorithm, is a computation, right? So that is why it's still difficult for me to kind of break those apart and think of learning as being distinct from computation, because the way it's like the learning itself, the process of learning, how we actually adapt the computational part is a computation, right? From that perspective, I'm not so sure about I mean, it is. I mean, at the beginning, what they say about the pillars of experimentation, and you've got theory and experimentation, and then computation being the third pillar. Um, it kind of, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, that's probably what that's not. I mean, let me. You know what? I will just ask. I don't know, right? Twitter or what? So I will just ask. I think I just go to Jared. and ask directly. So I think here. So quick question, or um, after a quick scan, one thing still remains unclear. Isn't the learning also a computation? Mm, like I get it that I, I get it. I get it. One can make a difference, right? Like, or you can differentiate and say, look, this is strict computation, and now and learning is computation and data, right? Mm, that was, give me a second, 'cause I think that was not the tweet. I think he did mention it a bit below. Exactly here. So he says, different computation, it helps refine the approaches we take, some of the hardest problems in chemistry. After a quick scan, one thing still remains unclear. So isn't the learning process itself also a computation? I mean, like I read your sort of as roughly learning that learning equals computation plus data, right? Still feels like it still feels like the process itself is a computation. Okay, read your definitions roughly meaning that learning equals computation plus data. So yeah, so the computation part would be like the query, the query part of it, right? Like, but it still feels like the actual process. Yeah. Mm, is a computation itself. I mean, that is like I get it. Like I get that's what that's kind of it's my struggle with machine learning in general. It's just a thing, another. It's a bit like you're going like another meta level, right? Um, so instead of writing the code that does the thing, you write the code that writes the code, right? But that's what makes it also computation. So I don't really think I don't. I'm trying to really hard to try to think about like whether I've missed something. But so after quick scan, one thing still remains unclear. Isn't the learning process itself also computation? Like I read your definition as rather meaning that learning was computation query plus data, but it still feels like the actual learning process is computation. It's computation itself. Yeah, because like that is, and I get it. So I get that you can say like, okay, with this approach, one can have a more relaxed view on, undecidability. Because it's like either you run something until it happens, or you take a look at the history and try to infer the future, right? Or try to take a look at data and yeah, maybe I should sort of deep dive more into the essence of all these, right? Machine learning in general, and because it does feel like it's something, it's definitely a step forward in the way we think, in the way from a computational perspective, it's definitely a way, it's sort of a step forward, in science and whatnot. But it still somewhat doesn't feel really so magical. Um, and so eye-opening. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm just it probably I just don't really understand or don't really kind of haven't really had that like aha, now I get it. It's it seems rather obvious, not in a don't get me wrong, not in a way that I'm like, oh, that's obvious and easy, but like in a way that it's yet another computational approach to solving a problem. Just take the data and adapt your stuff. Give me a second. Back here again. Um, yeah, that's basically. So what is it? Chemistry. Just let me quickly scan through these. 77% computation, duty part, computers, control progress. Talk about scaling costs necessary to have some model computation where costs can be quantified. We'll generally be assuming this means we use a finite, often local set of operations called quantum gates within a digital gate model. Physical constructions or that computers are built from modular components. Moreover, some of the results will is not as correct complexity, time complexity. Quantum computers can't fast forward in time either. This begs the question how fast it's going. This is a linear time. So it turns out that assuming one only has the available space to represent the system serially, the answer is no. There's some special systems that can be fast forward. It cannot be done in a most general case. Polynomially with the simulation time, this result is more unclear. Some has been. The assumption no fast forwarding result practically implies that no simulation which retains a complete level of detail at the quantum level can simulate physical systems faster than nature. It's kind of like an obvious restriction in a sense that like we are part of nature as well. So what we're building is natural in a way. Some reactions, like rusting, can take months to occur. Using a single molecular realization, a simulation could take comparable times to witness a reaction event, making discovery in this fashion totally impractical. However, most transition state theory based on static calculations of free energies and can allow access to rate constants and time scales much faster than direct physical simulations. So, the observation that chemical methods have been so successful in making predictions beyond physical time scales leaves one believing that perhaps physical systems always emit some form of reduction that will allow us to forecast results that we actually care about. Okay, so a recent string of results in quantum computer science has proven that, in fact, even in some very simple systems of construction, there must exist some questions that are fundamentally unanswerable ahead of time. That's yeah. I mean, But that seems to be the measurement problem in and of itself, right? And this list of problems surprisingly includes whether simple one-dimensional systems thermalize, which has implications for the predictive power of thermodynamics. In general systems, this is much stronger than simple chaos of dynamic systems. So thermalizing, I think that's based on what I checked recently. It means so they become in like thermal equilibrium. I mean, it's like what is heat anyway, and what is temperature? This is something that what is temperature? No. Physics. Temperature. Oh, what is then the heat, right? What is heat? It's a form of energy, okay, that is transferred between systems origins with different temperatures. Following from is the thermal energy. Okay, so it's an energy. It's just an energy. Has there been an answer? Check out the abstract. Do it, but like, have I missed something in the abstract? With the rapid development of quantum technology, one of the leading prediction simulation games, interestingly, even for full-scale quantum computers have developed, quantum computer science has really remarkable string results that directly impact this weather. Some of these results impact our understanding of chemistry in the real world. Understanding, we take the position that direct chemical simulation is best understood as digital experiment, while on one hand, clever has power quantum computers externally, it also shows limitations to such person leveraging results that quantum computers cannot outspace. For example, we build controversial stains that some chemical problems are basically just problems which no algorithm can deliver their solution in general. Known in computer science, yeah. Implications of the predictive power of thermodynamics models and topics like, however, argue that the perspective is not defeatist, but rather helps shed light into discussion of existing chemical models like transition state theory, molecular orbital theory, and thermodynamics as models to benefit from data. We contextualize recent results showing that data augmented models are more powerful road simulation. These results help us appreciate the success of traditional chemical theory, and not only can quantum computers provide data, but they can extend the class and power models that utilize these discussions. Oh God! But I mean, that's not the point, man. Ah, sorry. Oh, I thought it was an answer to my question. Yeah. That is the. Is that a bot? I think that's a bot. Is it? Yeah. That's a bot. That's a good one. I think it's a bot because yeah, I shared the actual PDF. We'll do better next time. So yeah. Anyway, I think that hasn't really changed. There's no problem with concrete. Questions no algorithm can answer. This leads to one to ask if there's always a predictive model or algorithm that simplify for simple questions, basically a result from science. There are indeed even relatively simple questions related to physical systems for which can prove that no single algorithm can answer for all such systems in infinite time. Mm, leaning on the ergodic hypothesis. What is the ergodic hypothesis? In physics and thermodynamics, the ergodic hypothesis states that over long periods of time, the time spent by a system in some region of the phase space of microstates with the same energy is proportional to the volume of its region, i.e. that all accessible microstates are equiprobable over a long period of time. The time some region is proportional to the volume. Where am I? Where am I? God, here. Under the assumption that the system is ergodic, indeed many standard molecular dynamic simulations explore both possible directions. Either now I know what translationally invariant means. I found this the other day. it means it's invariant depending on like there's something like time where you can like it doesn't matter where and when you do stuff like the process is always going to be the same. Repeat it indefinitely. This type of problem is known as an unsettled problem. The first example of which is the famous halting problem of Turing. Yeah. That's correct. Perhaps more familiar class of NP-complete problems is even when provided with a supposed answer, a model cannot verify if it's correct. This implies that for a number like an energy or free energy representing a system, either that number cannot be generally predictive. Tension that arises with the mapping of physical processes to halting problems. One typically maps the operations of the physical system to operations of a Turing machine with an infinite sized tape. If that tape were finite, one can spend very long but not infinite time examining all possible states of the system to arrive at the answer to any questions related to the state of the system. For example, in studying the dynamics of a finite physical system, one could discretize the possible states and expend an exponential amount of time in the system size determining an answer. Finite are of little consequence. The point of view, the exponential of even a modest-sized finite system would be longer than the age of the universe, despite their somewhat similar predictions in practice, too long to compute. We are embracing the viewpoint of undecidability dynamics, although the impossible dream of treating chemical equations by the exponential enumerations. Is Turing complete and as such can code the halting problem. Under visual constraint, real DNA that tends to form in life systems subject to other constraints that make its activity more predictable. Or give up. Yeah, I don't know. So the learning, like as I said, right? The to me, like after reading this whole thing, like it's still as I kind of tweeted in the reply. To me, it does not really seem like there's something so distinctive about the distinction between learning and computation is not that clear at least Jared seems to make it look like here. Because this is, rather than being defeatist, I think it actually encourages thinking about learning as distinct from computation and helps to refine the approaches we take. Like, it is not technically, like that's what I say here, right? It's just the learning process itself. It's still a computation. That's what is kind of confusing me a little bit. But maybe, so that's another paper, open access. Maybe I should go through these one. Power of data in quantum machine learning. So I see there's, okay, the same figure being used in here. It's 8 pages. What is the abstract? The use of quantum computing for machine learning is among the most exciting prospective applications of quantum technologies. Where machine learning tasks where data is provided can be considerably different than commonly studied computational tasks. So, okay, so so there's a claim here that the tasks where data is provided can be considerably different than commonly studied computational tasks. This is what I'd like to understand more. What is that considerably different? Like in this work, we showed that some problems that are classically hard to compute can be easily predicted by classical machines learning from data using rigorous prediction error bounds as a foundation. We developed methodology for assessing potential quantum advantage in learning tasks. The bounds are tight asymptotically and empirically predictive for a wide range of learning models. This construction explains numerical results showing that with the help of data, classical machine learning models can be competitive with quantum models, even if they are tailored to quantum problems. We then propose a projected quantum model that provides a simple and rigorous quantum speedup for a learning problem in the fault-tolerant regime. For near-term implementations, we demonstrate significant prediction advantage over some classical models on engineered data sets designed to demonstrate a maximum quantum advantage in one of the largest numerical test gate-based quantum machine learning to date, up to 30 qubits. Okay, so that paper goes through a specific example that will show an advantage. But I get the gist of the story, whereas like I know that like quantum machine learning is of no use if the data you have is classical. And if the data is quantum, then it's a bit more unclear, but it seems like that's the way it's supposed to be. And then the idea here is that you can have, yeah, basically, if you have the sensors putting data into the quantum computer, that's how you kind of get, over the problem of the fact that like otherwise quantum computers will be useless for that, from that perspective, right? Because you always have to have a classical encoding process where then you lose your exponential advantage. But it's still, yeah, I don't know, it's kind of still not clear. I did a bit of a detour. That was sort of part 2. You can watch part 1 as well. It's on YouTube if you're interested into the first chapters in the first sections of the paper. But I think so far I'm gonna leave it here. I don't know what Jared will answer, but it's I'll come back to that eventually. I'll come back to quantum machine learning at some point because I'm starting to gradually kind of sense this is a really interesting direction to explore from a quantum perspective as well, and the whole quantum simulation world, right? Where to me it does seem that's the actual killer app of a quantum computer rather than Shor's algorithm, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know if I have it here, right? But it's like these little things where you can wanna measure whether you're screwing something straight on the wall or on the floor. Something's like a surface even. You have the bubbles in there, like you're using nature's computational capabilities to get answers and simulate stuff. Yeah, I'll go back to the learning stuff. I'll go back to the physics project in the next stream. But that was just a nice detour, I think. I'll somewhat get to it at some point. Anyway, have a good day.